moving on to our next session, Culture Curry. I shall request Ms. Anuti Vishal to kindly come up on stage and moderate the session. Anuti is one of India's most credible food writers and critics. She writes on food history, linkages, trends, and the business of restaurants. She has researched into community-based cuisines and cooking practices, including of old Delhi, and documents these in her columns. I would also like to invite on stage our wonderful set of panel. First of all, on our panel, we have Mr. Zorawar Kalra, MD and founder, Massive Restaurants Private Limited. I would like to invite on stage Sabyasachi Gorai, also known as Chef Sabi. May I now invite on the panel Mr. Riaz Amlani, CEO and MD, Impresario Entertainment and Hospitality. Saransh Koila, youngest TV celebrity chef. I also would like to invite on the panel Anahita Dondi. I would request our moderator, Anuti, to kindly give a brief introduction of our panelists and commence the yummy session.
Hi, hello. So thank you for joining us. And I'm glad that this session is one which is just post-tea and snacks. Otherwise, we would not have been thinking about food. We would have been wanting to eat it. I have with me today a very, very distinguished panel. I'm sure all of you have been to their restaurants. I'm sure you follow them on the social media. You've seen them. They really need no introduction. They are all friends. I've known all of them for a number of years, maybe, you know, for almost a decade or so in some cases. So really, do you want me to introduce them again? So, okay, I'll just tell you the restaurants they run. You know, I think that's simpler, and you would perhaps identify them like that. Zorawar, of course, is the man behind Farzi Cafe, and also Masala Library, one of the finest Indian restaurants in the country. Sabi, as he's popularly called, has been, you know, very prominent presence in the Delhi circles. He's also consulting these days. He's doing very interesting concepts all around the country. Saransh, who was described as the youngest, what? TV chef? Celebrity chef. Okay, he doesn't like to be called a celebrity, so please don't call him that. But he is a very prominent presence on the social media, so follow him there. He's also started something called Goila Butter Chicken, which I think is a very smart restaurant concept to do, and we'll hear more about it. There's Riaz. Riaz is the man behind Social. Who hasn't been to Social? He's also the president of NRAI, which is the National, what? National Restaurant Association of India. So very important man to know. And Anahita. Anahita runs Soda Bottle Opener Wala. Again, one of the premier restaurants in the country in the Indian space, which has also kind of redefined the category of Indian dining. So we have, all in all, a really interesting panel here today. The luminaries, really, of the food world, and hopefully we are going to chat with them interestingly. That was a really long introduction. So cool. So the topic for today is food as culture. How food really should be looked in a particular context of the larger culture. And also then, how does food and restaurants impact our culture? So about the latter, of course, you know, all of us know how really the food scene in India has exploded. I started writing on food almost 15 years ago. In fact, I used to write for Today, which was the predecessor of Mail Today. And that was a time really when standalones were coming into their own. The first three standalones in the lifestyle genres in the country only came about in 2000, Olive, Indigo, and Diva. And there was nothing much happening. Food was considered to be half a beat. Nobody wanted to do it. And I was straight out of college. I was told to do it. And here we are today, cut to today. Look at the way it's exploded. You go to a party, people will talk about restaurants, their favorite dishes. Everyone wants to be a chef or a restaurateur. Everyone wants to be a food writer or a vlogger. So, the wheel is completely turned. But on the other hand, what we really are looking at is the consumption of food. That is what is perhaps interesting us in the present moment. What we don't perhaps pay attention to is the fact that food always has a context. There's a cultural context to food. All of us are here today because of that context, and I think it's important to therefore talk about that journey. So I'm going to ask Zorawar, whose father, Mr. Jiggs Kalra, has been one of the luminaries of the Indian food industry. His books, his research into Indian food really are unparalleled even today. He grew up in such an environment, so maybe Zorawar can talk a little bit about that.
Thank you. It's great being here. Amazing panel, amazing crowd. I want to talk about food as a culture first. To put things in perspective, and I know if there are any Bollywood or movie people here, they might not like this stat too much, but as is already proven factually and statistically, the Indian restaurant business is approximately 40 times larger than Bollywood. That's 40x, 40 times. So we spend a lot more on eating out than we do on watching movies, which is great for all of us on the panel, right? Because it helps our businesses. So it's huge. It's also the second largest employer of human beings in India after agriculture. So it's a very important business. But talking about culture, I think nothing represents culture of a society or a people better than food. And look at the diversity in India. I think you walk, not even walk, you drive down a few kilometers down south, 100 here, there, north, south, east, west. The kind of cuisine and the depth and the sophistication that's available in the cuisine of India is the perfect representative of our culture. And I think food by itself is also the only thing that I think all of us can do 3 times a day and never get bored. I mean, I come from a Punjabi household, so I'm actually the kind of person who at breakfast thinks what I'm going to have for lunch, and at lunch I think what I'm going to have for dinner, and dinner the next morning's breakfast. So actually I kind of grew up that way with my father. And growing up with him was a lot of fun. He is an amazing personality, but since the age of 10, I think the only topic of conversation in our household was food. I mean, literally, we lived food, all our vacations, and we used to take just one vacation a year, but always used to revolve around food. So he took me at that age, so 10 onwards, till maybe about 18, till I realized that I don't want to go for vacation with my parents anymore. So for those 8 years, he took me on 8 vacations to different parts of the world, took me to all the best restaurants. And I think the early teens, or maybe even pre-teens, maybe 12, is when I realized that this is all I want to do. I only want to do food because I think I'm in love with it. I can only see myself doing this. And I think if I want to promote my own culture, I can only do it through food. And at that age, and even my father's personal crusade has always been to put Indian food on the global palette permanently. And that's what we're doing. We're focusing on Indian food. We've opened our restaurants overseas already. But what we really want to do is showcase Indian food in all its beautiful, sophisticated, culinary, philosophical glory. We really think it's the greatest cuisine on earth, but nobody knows about it as well. Barring the UK, it's not a primary cuisine choice in any major city of the world. We want to change that. We want it to be considered as one of the top dining destination cuisine choices, whichever city you go to. And for that, we on this stage have a lot of responsibility, and I think it's up to us to really put it up there with the Japanese and the Mexican and the Chinese cuisines of the world.
So, yeah, sure. We'll talk about this in more detail. But Sabi, you tell me about, you grew up in Asansol, which is a really, I don't even know whether a lot of people have heard of the town, but it's a very interesting town. It's the one of the mining centers of India. Tell us about your upbringing and the food you ate.
It was very tragic. I was in Australia and people would ask me, where are you from? And I'm like, Asansol. And it's like, asshole, And I'm like, no, Asansol. You try to put in a fake accent to kind of make it sound very cool. And then I got fed up. I didn't tell anybody I'm from Asansol. I said I'm from Mumbai. The guy said, oh yeah, Africa. Yes, of course. So in 2000 in Sydney, people thought Mumbai was in Africa.
Good, you educated people.
And for the longest time that I lived there and I worked, till IPL didn't get launched, we were Africans. It's IPL which changed the Indian identity, because Indian food was cooked by Bangladeshis and Pakistanis. So even the mango chicken or the mango lassi or the butter chicken was never Indian. It was always in a Bangladeshi or a Pakistani takeaway. So Indians really didn't have any identity. In fact, the Sri Lankans had a brilliant identity. The Asian food has a lot of identity. So yeah, talking about Asansol is, that's not a great start. Fairly rudimentary coal miners town, no water, devoid of modern civilization. So you're pretty much born in the wild and growing up in the wild. It's like sort of being Tarzan. You're pretty much out in the wild. So from there, when you move to other cities and all, I think it's a great start that you started with very little. And today, I think a lot of us, including my family, I think we give our children a lot because we think it is necessary. But I think if you start with less, the hunger is much more. So for me, food came very naturally. It was not a business decision. I wasn't really born in a legacy like him. I wish I was. But it was more like, I'm hungry. What do? I eat. I was in art school and there was no food. And for the longest time, I didn't see a career coming at the art school. You couldn't eat your paintings or your paints. And interestingly, the color, the cost of color was the same those days than it is now. And this decision has to now figure out that how much our economy has changed. Because those days, the oil color tubes were $60. It is $80 today.
Tell us about the cost of food.
It's the cost of food. Yes, that's exactly where I'm going. My litti chokha was 2.5 rupees. For 3 littis and the chokha that came free. Roti sabji was 50 paisa a roti, sabji and chutney came free.
Now?
So now it's grown tremendously.
So clearly, what this shows us is also the rate at which interest in food has grown. Right? Because, there are so many more consumers and therefore prices are also going up.
Prices have gone up, but I don't think it's justifiably how it has gone up. At the same time, I think a lot of our prices are controlled today by the real estate where we occupy. So we just we're talking about it. So it's more about the real estate that you're paying for, not really the food. So internationally, whenever you're traveling, you're eating fantastic food at a brilliant low price, and you're always thinking, why in India am I spending so much more for average food? So going back to my roots, I think it was very basic. It was very necessary. It was very important for survival, and that's how I've kept my food philosophy all my life. And I think it's important that something that you take or you put inside your body, it has to be serious. It's not fun. It's not casual. It is not business. It's something that you have to take it very seriously. It's your nourishment. It's your DNA that you pass on to your next generation. It's your body. So I think for me, food is very natural and very to my soul. It's something that I feel very connected to.
Okay, Saransh, now you have to give us some great dishes that you ate on all your travels. He's just finished this fabulous journey that I'm very envious of. From Delhi to Thailand by road. And clearly he's encountered some really good food traditions all along. Tell us some, great dishes that you ate.
So, but I'll start with one memory that I have of how I got into food. So, I was 12 years old and my mom and dad had this massive fight in the drawing room. I was 12 years old, my sister is 8, and we've all walked out of the rooms and we're like, what is happening? And, as kids, you don't understand. Like, when your parents fight, you get nervous. You don't know what's happening. And then, out of nowhere, I hear, bhindi mein fir aloo dala hai. Like, and my dad is furious. He slams the door, walks out of the house. After 2 hours, he comes back. And he's like, okay, fine, I'm going to eat dinner now. But, so that's how, our family would treat food. Like, aloo cannot be repeated more than twice in a week. So then my dad started to make these timetables where he would say, Lauki, Karela, Bhindi, Gobi, Matar, but no aloo. And it was a subject in our house because it was very important. By the way, I belong to a vegetarian family.
No paneer either, no?
No paneer either.
Good.
So, and his restaurant is called Goila Butter Chicken.
Yeah. it's a little tragic because when I was opening Goila Butter Chicken, I got a call from my Tauji. He's like, "Pura khandan vegetarian hai, kya kar raha hai?" And I was like, "Don't worry. In Bombay, everybody thinks Goila is Punjabi, but we are actually Baniyas and we are like Goyals. So imagine if it was Goyal butter chicken. That would be absolutely wrong."
But how interesting.
Or
huh?
Agarwal
Good.
Steakhouse.
Okay, India is a diverse country, regardless of whatever anyone tells you.
So, no, my great-grandfather didn't believe, apparently, in the caste system. So we were Goyals and we got converted into Goila because he wanted us to be neutral. But none of that has followed. We celebrate all festivals, everything happens, but we are Goilas. But that's how it started. And so my family would travel for food. You know, like we didn't have a lot of money, so our travels were restricted to food. Whether it's Kamla Nagar, Karol Bagh, or going to Shimla, or going to Mussoorie, going wherever, but it would be inclined towards food. My grandfather was from Nainital, and so a lot of UP, again, influence, and a lot of, he would make bedmi aloo on weekends, and he would make pahadi dam aloo with fresh khada masalas. So that's where I kind of picked up my passion for food from, and I think as a kid, when you see these things happening, and later when I got a chance to become a chef and to grow up and actually follow this whole food, I won't say a legacy, but then they were all passionate about food. Like my dad wanted to have he wanted to be a vegetable vendor. So that was his idea of business, ki sabzi bechni hai. Like chamakte hue bangan, he would say, and you know, tomato. So it's amazing that everybody in the family wanted to do something with food, but they didn't land up doing anything with it. Right. So I'm the first one who kind of ventured in the food industry, and I got lucky because when I was also 12, I used to sit with my Dadi and Dadaji, and I used to watch Chef Sanjeev Kapoor. So, and Tarla Dalal. So I would follow recipes from her books. I would follow recipes from his show. In fact, I had this mini cookbook of 100 recipes from Chef Sanjeev. When I got to meet him in real life, I gave the book to him. That I am actually one of those boys who have cooked when they were in 12th, when they were 12 years old and not played cricket.
And now there may be people who are doing the same with you, but we are going to talk a little bit more about this later in the second half of our session.
So and you'll talk about the travel also later. I think we should go to Riaz.
So Riaz, okay, before you speak, I have to tell the audience a little anecdote. About the first time I met Riaz, he doesn't remember it, I remember it. And that was, I think, in 2006 or so, where he told me about the story of how he opened Mocha. And that was really, I think, because you and some of your friends were awake the whole night on a New Year's Eve. And that was one moment where you were only conversing and you wanted to really just distill that moment in a bottle and present it to the larger world and let them be involved with it. So really, you know, this very cosmopolitan, Bombay sort of an upbringing has translated into his restaurants and into your journey. Talk about, you know, the cosmopolitan Bombay culture that you grew up in.
I feel a little bit like the odd one out in this panel because everybody over here loves their food. And I know you're going to find it hard to believe that I'm not really that into food. I don't even know how to cook. I need a recipe to boil water. It's a true story. Yeah, I do. And so I really don't approach food from restaurants from the food perspective. For me, what is really fascinating is how important a role food plays in interactions between humans. I mean, there is very little human interaction without food being involved at some level or the other. Somebody comes to your office, you will give him a cup of tea, you will give him some pani, you know, you will sit down. Friends have come over, you can't just sit down and not do anything, so there's always going to be food and you know, or a drink for that matter. And why there's a need to consume something together every time you're with somebody else. I mean, it's just bizarre, but we do it, it's so subconscious, it's so deeply rooted in us that food is always around. So for me, that was the fascinating part. I always thought, growing up in Bombay, I think this is interesting, right? So the average Indian is still eating out 4 times a month, right? In mega metros, people are eating out 9 times a month. And if you compare Western civilizations and they are eating out, Singapore, for example, which is on the other end of the spectrum, eats out 55 times a month. So out of 90 possible meals, you're eating out. So we have tremendous headroom to grow. But in India, still, for a lot of people, eating out is still an occasion. We might take it for granted, and most other people in this room will take it for granted. But for me, that special moment of going to a restaurant when I was young with my father and my mother was really magical. And like there's the manager over there, you know, it usually was a Catholic guy because in Bombay they were the English-speaking guys, and they were magical people. They had everything, like, you know, they snapped a finger and something appeared, and if they could like bring out a toy for you or a sweet for you, or you know, whatever you wanted, the guy produced. He was God for me. Like, I was like, I want to be that guy. I want to be this restaurant manager when I'm growing up. So for me, that was really the fascinating part. And I think even when we were growing up, so eating out wasn't an everyday affair. Eating out was once in a while thing. But in a city like Bombay, for example, is where I grew up. I grew up with a Parsi mother and a Muslim father. And food in my house is outstanding. Right? So I actually used to not want to eat at restaurants, but eat at home because the food was really, really so good. But just this whole process of what it means to some people to go to a restaurant. Like, we used to only go to 2 restaurants. We used to go to a place called Flora, which is a Chinese restaurant in Worli. It's still there. And we used to go to a place called Talk of the Town, which was this kind of live band place, which is now Jazz by the Bay in Churchgate. I don't know if people... And those are the only 2 restaurants we used to go to. And all restaurants had the same menu. They had Indian, Chinese, and continental. And that was it. That was a standalone restaurant. And then you had the 5-star restaurants. And then you had the UDP restaurants, and that was it. So it was a very different kind of thing. But in a city like Bombay, when I was growing up, I often found that we don't have public spaces. We have small homes. How do we interact with each other? I mean, how much can you stand on Marine Drive, and how many rounds of Worli Seafest can one take before, you know, there's some interaction happening? So for me, creation of a restaurant or a cafe, which I'm really into. I love cafes. I think they're slightly different from restaurants, because in a restaurant, you go to for the food, and you go for the novelty and the experience. But in a cafe, you go for community, you go for comfort, and you go for convenience. And they're 2 different things. So for me, that is a very exciting part of how a restaurant plays a role in human life. Like I was telling you earlier, so many times people tell me that, hey, we met in your restaurant, we dated in your restaurant, now they're married. So how closely it affects people is really what interests me in the business.
Yeah, and that's really the beauty of food, because at the end of the day, you know, we may go boast about a fabulous meal that we've had at XYZ place, but it's really about bonding. It's really about sharing, and that's you know, really the cornerstone of food as culture. Anaita, tell us about you know, you're so rooted in the Parsi tradition. Tell us what is the food about? It's one of India's syncretic cuisines. You must talk about that.
I mean, just because we're talking about cultures and family, and it's something that, and you're talking about Parsi food again. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit and talk about, as a student, when, you know, you're in your class 10th or your class 8th or whatever it might be. And that's when I said that, okay, I want to be a chef, because I saw my mother cooking. And she used to bake, and she used to do a lot of Parsi meals from home. That's when in Delhi there were no restaurants who would do Parsi food, and the community is extremely small in Delhi. There are 300 Parsis. And so for me, it was always extremely good food. Like Riaz said, you know, in a family, you have, I grew up with souffles and moussakas and lasagnas and things like that, which we were very exposed to. And because of my dad's travels, you always get back cheese, and you get these chocolates, and, you know, you're sort of, this entire world of the Western world actually was something that interested me a lot. And like hotel management graduates or new chefs, it's French cuisine, or you want to do something not Indian, because, you know, Indian was never given that priority. Indian was never given that stature. So for me, it was always pastry. And then after Le Cordon Bleu, and there was this moment that I call the pork chop moment in my life. When I was in Le Cordon Bleu, we made pork chops and with apple sauce and all of that, and you get to take it back home. And that moment, when I looked at those pork chops and I saw the sauce, it was just all too bland for me. So I washed off the sauce. I made a vindaloo masala. I put the pork chops into it. I sat down and I dunked in bread. And that moment was where I realized that, that is extremely satisfying. Why are we running behind trends? Why are we, in college, you look at Baum and Whiteman, you're like, acha, or you look at, a trend like 2015 is going to have these trends, Spanish food or small plates or whatever it might be. Why are we running behind that when we're actually so deeply rooted? And it was a moment which made me realize that, there's so much from my family and there's so much from my culture which I've not even given importance to. And when I came back to India, and that's when I met Chef Sabi, and he was the one who actually told me that, you are Parsi and why don't you do something with Parsi food? And that's when the concept of soda bottle opener came to life. So for me, it was that moment, it was those moments which made me think that, it's the culture that you come from, and it's very natural because you've grown up eating it, and but you don't end up giving it that importance because you end up following trends. And even when I talk to younger people in colleges, I tell them, go back to regional food. It was something that I opened up my eyes to, and I realized the power of it, because I realized that once you go deep in your roots, you learn the food and where you come from, and then you put that on a plate. It's more satisfying than learning an aglio olio or learning how to cook mussels, because that's not where you're from. That's not that's not what's seasonally grown or locally grown. So for me, it happened. Somewhere before Soda Bottle Opener Wala opened, and it was a platform that I grabbed, and I made sure that I could make Parsi food shine, or as we say, you want to make it cool so that people actually want to try it. Otherwise, it was always at home or at dharamshala or wherever you would eat Parsi food. So for me, it was a journey where I learned techniques, but I went and took it back to making Parsi food cool.
And the food of your own family.
And
really.
the food, and also mom making the masalas, and that coming, from her, which was very authentic. To be able to give that to an audience, and for me, that was I was very young. I had mentors like Chef Sabi and Chef Sujan now currently. So I think they gave me that platform, and they trusted me because you've eaten that food, you've grown up with that food, you'll be able to showcase that food, and I did that. And with that, I've actually found out that there's so much more currently, which I'm working on the lost recipes for Parsis. So from there, the journey goes on into a lot more.
Yeah, I think one of the most heartening things that's happened with food in India really is this whole resurgence of regional traditions. India is such an old civilization also when it comes to food, Of course, we have history which we think of as something static. But when you look at food history or the diverse food traditions and cultures that we have, you see that how dynamic they've been. We have such a syncretic heritage, such a composite culture. And food really, when you see something on a plate, you see that composite culture expressed through food. I grew up in Lucknow. And again, that is one city that any so-called wannabe foodie aspires to go to and do a food trail in. But when you see even things like now Tunde Kebab is so much in news, but it's a mix of so many things, It's not a dish of a community. It's really a mix of so many influences. I was reading, Sharar is a very famous historian who's written these narratives of 19th century Avdi, Nawabi Lucknow. And he says that one of the influences for something like Galati kebab or Galawat ke kebab could really be the French pate tradition, because the French were really, also very strong in Lucknow. We had a colonial presence. We, of course, had the local regional Rajas who came and established their palaces and their kitchens. And, of course, we had the Nawabi culture. So to be able to see food in that context, in a larger historical and cultural context, I think is very, very important. But what happens with food also is that food influences culture as well. It's influenced by culture, it's an expression of culture, but it also influences culture. And we have people here on the panel really, whose cooking and whose restaurants have very visibly impacted the culture of the youth in this country today. So let's talk a little bit about that. Zorawar, I think we should begin with you, and let's talk about what's happening with Indian food. How is Indian food being reimagined, represented? What is the direction in which it's headed?
Yeah, very pertinent question. Well, let me start off first by giving you guys the real reason why Galauti kebab is so soft. It was made for the Nawabs who used to eat so much pan that they had no teeth, but they still wanted to have meat. It's a fact. It was made for the pleasure-loving nobles, and it is one of the greatest kebabs, one of the greatest institutions from this country. I think once it goes overseas, it'll be the greatest export, along with our basmati, right? And it's unfortunate to see what's happening. They're very close friends of ours, the original Muhammad Usman and his family. And if they want to open in Delhi, I'm more than welcome to open with them. So let's hope
they continue in Lucknow.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is short term.
We are not talking about this.
But talking about how you said food influences culture and all that, I think we as restaurateurs have always struggled with Indian food finding its space. Finally, it's here. Whenever you spoke of Indian restaurants, you usually spoke of them that it's my Dada Dadi's anniversary, so I'll go. It's my father's birthday, so I'll go. But you never went for date night. I don't think anybody took their date to eat butter chicken and Rogan Josh. I don't think that's happened. It doesn't even happen in the UK, where they find curry cool after pub night. After the pub crawl, they go and eat curry and they get their fingers all yellow with all the haldi. And this remains yellow for the next 4 days because there's so much turmeric, and that's the only spice of any consequence that they put inside their curries, because most of those restaurants, like Sabi said, are not owned by Indians anyway. But Indian food always lacked this cool hipness, this beautiful packaging, this marketing, all of that. So I thought, when I opened Farzi Cafe 2.5 years ago, my whole demographic was the millennial. The millennial is a person, and unfortunately I'm no longer a millennial. I'm a little 4 years away, but apparently a guy or a gal who's born between 84 and 2004. So a person who reached early childhood by the turn of the century. And these are the people that have been born in this brave new world. They have a lot of spending capacity. They have this sense of entitlement. I don't use the word entitlement in a negative way. I'm just saying they have this. Their parents have given them that, that leisure, that luxury. But they're also full, they have a lot of choices. So they're spoiled. They're well-traveled, they're sophisticated, they know how to spend their money, they go out and eat often, so they add a lot of value to our business here. But they're very, very important. I always thought that if a cuisine is to prosper, it first has to appeal to its own youth. And unfortunately, our own youth were not eating Indian food. You're going for burgers and pizzas. I mean, when we were growing up, it was uncool to go for butter chicken or to go to eat, chole bhature. It was actually considered uncool. Today, with the advent of this modern Indian food, and that's not the only thing that's adding value, but regional and modern Indian food, what's happened is suddenly Indian food has become cool. Most of the new restaurants opening nowadays, or at least a large percentage of them, are around this new mega phenomena that I like to call modern Indian. It's become extremely popular.
What is modern Indian? Is it foam and air, or is it
no, that's molecular.
Something else?
But modern Indian, I think, just refers to kind of a artistic recreation of, or fusion is the bad word because fusion could be considered confusion, but let's just say amalgamation of multiple flavors and techniques without losing track of the original flavors. So the authentic dish, so if you're giving, for example, vada pav inside out, the pav might be inside the vada, but it has to taste like a proper Bombay vada pav. It cannot taste something off. It has to taste like the original host dish. So I think that's become a mega phenomena, and I don't think that's bad. Because I think modern Indian is going to help Indian food reach that global status. It's going to make it more appealable to a wider audience. and it's adding a lot of value there. But the other mega phenomena that I'm seeing nowadays is regional food. And yesterday I was at a stage actually talking to an audience like you, and I mentioned Soda Bottle Opener Wala as being one of those amazing phenomena restaurants that have brought back this almost lost cuisine. I mean, in Delhi, there was not even a single Parsi restaurant that I could go and eat Bida Pe Ida. I mean, I love Bida Pe Ida. I mean, and I know Parsis love eggs on everything, but I definitely never thought bhindi and egg would be a great combination, but it is. So I think...
Which is actually a dish which we make with leftovers.
Yeah.
So it's any leftovers and you break an egg on it.
Exactly. The eggs make everything better. Eggs and cheese, right?
Break 3 eggs for you, 1 egg for me,
The
probably.
Parsi consumption of Ida is 6 eggs per person per day.
That's a wrestler omelette.
And they live forever, they never die. They don't eat any vegetables, right? Chicken is a vegetable. They will eat eggs and eggs and eggs and eggs with meat, but they never die. So there's something to be said about that.
Kind of close to the your culture also, right? A lot of non-veg in your culture.
Very Kayas food. I belong to a community called the Kayas, whose food is an amalgamation of Mughal and Hindu influences, but very red meat centric. You're right.
Which is my kind of food actually. Though I also think chicken is actually a vegetable. In fact, I think it's worse than a vegetable. I prefer paneer to chicken, to be honest. So I think the regional Indian food is going to be a huge thing, but it's good to repackage Indian food and make it cool and hip so that the youth start eating it again, and that way we'll be able to put it at the top of the pedestal.
So I'm going to interrupt here and ask a question which I think a lot of the audience would also like to know. What do you think, how do you think regional Indian food can be made into viable restaurants? I mean, of course, Soda Bottle is an example. But do you think, we have instances of these mom and pop Goan food restaurants or Bihari food restaurants? Are they viable restaurants? So both you and Riaz must answer this.
Yeah, I actually definitely do think so. There is this one, absolutely. I think regional Indian food has just to be marketed properly. A big restaurateur needs to get behind it, put the muscle, the marketing muscle, the packaging, the beautiful location, and it works. There's this beautiful restaurant called Bernardo's in Gurgaon.
I know, yeah.
In Gurgaon, right? Amazing Goan food. It's a hole in the wall. It's at some top floor of some Galleria mall, and me and my wife go there at least once a month. And it's fantastic, and it's always packed. You can never get a space. So I think if it's, now the same restaurant opened in Cyber Hub and could afford those rents, it would easily do double, triple the sale. So I think it's about, the viability definitely exists. Regional Indian food is great. People just need to know about it. I mean, literally, we've put 2 or 3 northeastern dishes on the masala library menu, and I'm not kidding with you, the Naga pork is the #1 ordered dish on that menu. But nobody knows that there is this beautiful fermented black bean pork available in the Northeast.
So now I'm going to ask Riaz and grill him a little bit on this. But do you think that regional Indian food in a restaurant format can exist in a single restaurant? Should it be part of a larger menu with many different things, or can it just be, say, Northeast food or very specific Naga food or Kayast food, or now you've made a success of Parsi food, but it's really a Bombay
cafe. But then
cafe.
with Parsi food, we've also put in Bombay favorites.
Yeah.
We've also put in a little Bori influence, because I think you've got to balance it out. He'll probably add to that.
What do you feel as a restaurateur?
We've, in the last 15 years, we've gone through an evolution in our food buds. We were very obsessed with what was happening in the West and what West mein kya ho raha hai. My cousins in America live like that. I went for holiday. I want to come back and I want the same experience. People got very excited with McDonald's, and then people got very excited with Pizza Hut, and they got very excited with Domino's, and they got very excited with European food now suddenly coming in restaurants like Indigo. They came in and they did wonderful things with, and for the longest time, for about 8-9 years, darling, we only go to, we don't like Indian.
Only do Italian.
And so that was there. And then I think that after this becoming available to us freely, and after having tried it, we've rejected it. And I think that for the first time, we are looking at ourselves with, it's like a zeitgeist almost. We're looking at ourselves with a sense of pride. Earlier, when we looked at ourselves in our Indianness, we had almost a slightly apologetic or a slightly humorous take, and there was kitsch, but there was no real incorporation of Indian sensibilities into aesthetic, which now is emerging. So I think there's a Indian voice, finally a loud and a proud Indian voice, which is just emerging. And yes, you could package it nicely, and you could present it nicely. But I'll tell you that these restaurants have never gone away. They've always been there. They've always been packed. Like you go to Bombay, there are restaurants which you will not hear of, but they're famous for Gomantak, and there are no bells and whistles. You know, there's no foam and there's no molecular this and that. It is real, and it is yeah. I mean, I can name you 1,000 restaurants in Bombay which have been around for 50 years and are still going strong. But the food is real, the food is done in context. And I think that for me, those restaurants are aces even now. Yes, you need to redefine what you think of Indian food, because
and how do you take them forward also, you know? Is it scalable? Is it not scalable? Does it have to be owned by the person who's cooking the food, you know, somebody to take ownership of the food? All those are, I think, very pertinent.
So yes, they can franchise the concept. I'm not a big believer in the franchise model, but there are different ways of getting it out there. So there are various ways of growing, but the point is that there is now a revival of interest in ethnic food, which is, like, everybody on the stage agrees. It is huge, and I think that is going to be the way forward for India, because we have complex palates. We have complex palates. It's not like, I had a cook once and I wanted to put him in smokehouse grill, and he was an Indian chef. I said, "Yaar, pata nahi aap kar paoge ki nahi." He's like, "Ye khana hai, ye to main neend mein kar loon." You know, it's so easy for them to cook Western food. There's no rocket science. Indian food is rocket science.
That's true. And you know, one more thing I want to add. You know, I think the Indian palate is so deeply leaning towards those big, bold flavors that Indian food is known for that it's not even funny. No other cuisine can compete. Even those, you know, when we were growing up, those ladies that used to go to those Italian restaurants and eat that risotto, they actually wanted to eat biryani. Just biryani was not cool. So they used to go and eat the risotto. But honestly, everybody loves eating those curries and, you know, eating with your hands, you know, immersion of all the five senses. I think the Indian way of eating and just the flavor of Indian food, I mean, just look at that. We spend 3 marinations on a kebab. It takes 14 hours to boil that dal. And compare that with putting a piece of meat on a grill and cooking for 10 minutes. I mean, can you compare the amount of effort and sophistication and
I'm sure the audience is salivating and they will have much to say, you know, when we throw the house, you know, when we throw this session open for questions. But, you know, because our time is limited, I'm going to now go on to another topic which everyone discusses, and that's really of celebrity chefs. Sabby, what's your take on this whole new culture of celebrity chefs in our midst? First, tell us interesting instances of people wanting to be celebrity chefs.
With 2 things, I wanted to take up that you mentioned in the last one, that would the business be run by people who are cooking? I would want to talk about that as well. And also about celebrity chefs. This question, the answer would be given by Saransh here about how you become a celebrity chef.
So Saransh doesn't like to be called celebrity.
That's why we're going to pass it on to him.
Okay, joint answer.
Okay, so about, I think in India, the cooks, when I started cooking, I have heard bhansis, I have heard chaprasis, I've heard all of that. Chefs wasn't a very cool term. You know, people in white jacket became very cool and very hip after MasterChef got launched. So due credit given to TV and celebrity chef, you know, that cadre. I personally feel cooks in India, or let's say if I refer to all people who are cooking or involved in the food industry, needs to learn commerce and business, because Indian cooks don't know that. And that is why the reason today India has restaurants by restaurateurs and people who knows the business well. And I'm not saying they're not really paying their chefs well or they're not really encouraging them, but the chefs are almost becoming like saddled horses, racehorse, who are constantly running but to win a match, but never going to get the prize. We'll get little extra chara and extra water, but the prize money will always go to the entrepreneur or the guy who's actually sitting on top of the horse. So Indian chefs and cooks have to wake up and realize that they're only saddled horses and, you know, jerk off or you know, the jockey off the back and start running for themselves. It is not going to be easy because the Indian chefs don't know commerce, Indian chefs don't know business. So these things needs to be learned, and it is not easy. It's not that suddenly you can learn it. But food is intrinsic, so if you know the cooking, you at least can survive for a while.
No, but there's the other side to it, right? I mean, chefs think that they are born celebrity chefs. They don't want to be chefs, but they only want to be
So the
celebrity
second part
chefs.
of that answer.
I love chefs, but there are two people that have the biggest ego, doctors and chefs. But I love all chefs.
So the
No,
other
but I
part
think,
of
I think it's not just commerce, but I think it's very important that chefs understand that, like Zorawar made a beautiful analogy that a restaurateur is actually a conductor, while the
True,
artist
true.
is like there's a horn section, there's a wind instrument section. The whole point is it needs to be conducted and all presented in a single chord which resonates correctly. Right, so chefs also need to learn the art of restaurant.
100%, because I've had feedback forms written in my restaurant saying, please go back to cooking. You don't know nothing about running a restaurant. So, so it's very encouraging to have such feedback, and it kind of really motivates you to come back and not just cook, also to run the business. To answer the celebrity chef part of it, it's very interesting because I'm connected to the Young Chefs Forum. I'm also the president of the Young Chefs Association of the India. I keep meeting students all the time. I had met him when he was very young, actually. He was very kind of starry-eyed, had a very fancy jacket. 24 with a lot of golden buttons on it.
Yeah, I do that sometimes.
And he didn't wash the jacket for a very long time, because if he did wash the jacket, I'm not going to say it was smelling, but it did. So, this whole thing, very starry-eyed, I want to become a celebrity chef. Two things. I want to learn molecular gastronomy. Sorry, due respect. And I want to become a celebrity chef. Now, these two things are really today something I don't know, I think maybe with Zorawar, as in who's also been the pioneer of this modern Indian kind of a direction, also should tell the students or the upcoming chefs that yes, you could do that provided you learn your basics well, and there is no overnight therapy or story to become a celebrity chef. And learning from Mr. Jigs Kalra, as in I remember looking up to him when I was in Singapore at the Gourmet Summit, and that was probably the first time on an international platform some Indian chef is cooking, and I still remember the quail. And the stuffed quail made history, and I still have that CD which has that quail dish of your father. And it felt so proud to be in the audience of that massive Gourmet Summit, where there's only one Indian cooking and one Indian in the audience. Right? So these things don't happen overnight. So if you want to become the guy who's put together Prasad together, it is a long journey. It's a lot of effort. So today's generation has to learn that. Everybody's trying to cook on their iPhones. I have nothing against iPhones, but smartphones don't make you a better cook. Just putting up good videos, good pictures on Instagram. Yes, you're getting fantastic likes and people are following you, but what's on the plate? So internationally, there's a huge debate and a huge audience that is talking about bring back the plate. Okay, we're putting food on boxes, trunks, shoes, anything. But that's fine, as in that's going to pass by. But if the food is not good, you can put it wherever you like.
Yeah, but like I was saying, and I was mentioning to some of you guys, that...
We're going to still pass this question on to Sanans.
I'm going to pass this question on to Anaita, because she has some interesting reactions to this. But before that, I'm going to tell you an anecdote about... I saw a video of this chef describing his dishes, and he plated something, I can't remember, it must have been some fish, in a split butter sauce. What is a split butter sauce? Anyone knows here?
Butter that went bad?
Yes, absolutely. So, that's also what the cult of the celebrity chef sometimes does, Anaita, you were telling me some stuff.
It was one of those conferences in in IHM, and because I'm young and people want to know how do you become a young chef who's doing so well, and this person comes up to me and asks me very confidently, how do I become a celebrity chef? And I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, are you asking me that because I'm still on my way to becoming a full-on chef? I don't even have 10 years of experience. So I told him I just wanted to become a chef, and you get the celebrity part of it. It comes to you if you're good enough. You can't think of it, just being a celebrity chef, and that's what their mission is, and that's what their vision is, which is actually not the right thing. You want to be a good chef, you want to learn the basics, and then you want to call yourself a chef. Forget celebrity chef, which you get after so many years of appreciation. And so that was something that kind of woke me up, because I'm extremely active on social media. I think social media is a very strong tool. If you want to showcase that you're doing a special menu, you've got people following you, whatever it might be, they will be on your social media, liking your post. And other than liking your post, there's also a lot of interaction between the chef and the audience. So you put up recipes which you might want to share. So I think it's a powerful tool if we want to use it right. And I think it's also a message to a lot of young chefs that you can't just get out of college and become a celebrity chef. You've got to work towards it, and that status of celebrity, of being a celebrity chef, will come with it. So I think it's a journey.
I hope nobody in the audience is a wannabe celebrity chef.
Can I say,
Sure.
I mean, we are confusing a TV chef for a celebrity chef? Is
No,
that,
no.
Is that
So,
what we're talking
because
about?
I'm going to come
Is
to
somebody
this.
who's a television personality, is that
So
what
that
makes
is
a
a
celebrity
completely
chef?
separate
So
bit.
if you're a chef because you're amazingly awesome and therefore you're well renowned and well known, you're a celebrity chef. But if you're a chef which is on TV and have, like, a lot of chefs are excellent brand ambassadors of food, and they convince millions of people
Yeah.
to come to our restaurants. They might not be excellent restaurateurs, but they are excellent communicators, and they're pleasing personalities. And I think that, for me, for one, as much as, you can get irritated by saying, "Arey, ye kaun hai?" Real world mein nahi टिक पाएगा एक दिन. But they are actually changing the way people are perceiving food. They're changing the way people are perceiving the profession. For the longest time, being in the hospitality business was not considered cool. अगर lawyer, doctor, engineer, बस.
Bureaucrat.
No, but there
और
is a
शेफ
lot
तो वो
of-
बनता था जिसको और कुछ काम नहीं मिला.
But, you know,
So they play an important role in
TV
this.
chefs is a completely different, and Saransh and I have had this conversation really, and he really is very clear on this. And I've done a story on this, because TV chefs sometimes come in for unnecessary criticism. But, we have to be clear. So you want to do TV because you're a good communicator, you can present things well, you're an entertainer, all of that. You want to be a restaurant chef because you like to cook.
No, just
But you have to be
Yeah, I
competent
just want to
in
add something,
whatever you're
one
doing.
second. So, as a chef who always wanted to be in the kitchen, for me, I also had, you have the stereotype for TV chefs that, everything looks glamorous, it's all easy, all your mise en place is done, and here you are in the kitchen sweating it out in 40 degrees or 50 degrees or whatever it is. I recently worked with a TV channel, and that entirely changed my perspective, because it made me realize you have to also cook good, you have to sound intelligent, you have to look good, and you're communicating and you're cooking, and it's not easy. So I had this respect for them, which I think a lot of students or a lot of people who are slogging it out in restaurants don't have that respect.
The only problem happens is when people, they don't want to put in the hard work, they don't want to go through that journey, and they only aspire to the celebrity-ness of it.
Only
And
the
that's true
glamorous,
across professions,
And
you
here
don't.
is a chicken I made earlier.
So, you can't aspire. I mean, so many people aspire to be stars. They can't act, it's really the same thing.
No,
So-
but a TV chef that doesn't know how to cook is like the lead singer of a rock band who's tone deaf. I mean, you have to learn how to sing if you want to be the lead singer of a rock band. Similarly, a TV chef has to know how to cook, otherwise how will he influence
I'd rather have a
other
chef
people?
presenting a television show about food
Any day.
than having a person who's not a chef presenting.
Yes.
Otherwise, food shows used to be like, delicious. Delicious. Tasty. Oh, yummy. And that was
No,
it.
no,
Like,
so all
you
those
get that
adjectives in
happen.
any case should be banned. Yummy, tasty, and delicious.
Foodie.
No,
Foodie
foodie.
word. Foodie needs to be
and
banned.
also all those Instagram hashtags absolutely should be banned. Okay, so now we have to bring in Saransh into this conversation. Talk about being a TV chef, being a celebrity on Instagram and Twitter, this whole business of social media as well, which is changing the culture of food in so many ways.
I've learned one thing in life. First is जो दिखता है वो बिकता है, and that's the honest truth. We are sitting in a Mail Today event, so if you come in a newspaper, if you come in a newspaper, if your name is there, you're going to sell. If you come on the television, you tell them this is what I'm good with or this is what our country is good with, it sells. So I will be very honest. I entered. My first job was at Leela's in Bangalore. I worked there for an year, and I realized that this is not my cup of tea, because when I was in the tandoor section, the chef won't let me marinate the meat. He won't let me touch it, because he would send me to the store to get the masalas for the rest of the day. But he will like, once you spend three years with me in this kitchen, you will learn everything. And I'm like, 3 years in this kitchen? And that's like the end of me already. So no, that is how I thought, because I was somebody who was natural with cooking. I wanted to cook on my own terms. I was like, Arey, meko, my Dadaji has taught me that aloo, and I've learned this from my chef in IHM. Why can't I apply it right away? Why do I have to go through 15 years of standing in that kitchen to prove a point?
So I wish we had some hotel chef here to answer this.
So that's how I quit. And
I'm sure, yeah.
I always wanted to travel. I wanted to learn while traveling. So then this idea came in my head that, okay, the easiest way to travel is that you go to a TV channel. You tell them that, okay, I can cook. I used to be a part-time MC before I became a chef. So I had good oratory skills. So I can talk, I can cook, I look decently okay. So, so that was my pitch. That's how I actually
Oh, you must tell the audience about the kind of proposals you get on Twitter and so on.
No, because we talk about packaging and branding, and Zoravar was talking about Indian food being packaged and rebranded again. So this also comes out of social media. So this hashtag called Goila Butter Chicken was brought into existence by a blogger on Twitter, who came to my house for a housewarming party in Bombay, and he went on to Twitter and said hashtag Goila Butter Chicken, which went viral that night on Twitter. And I was like, hey, like what happened here? I'm just cooking one butter chicken in Bombay and it's gone viral on Twitter. From there, this was 2013. Today we have a brand which is called Goila Butter Chicken, which just serves butter chicken, which is packaged and marketed in a very cool way. We have a hashtag which is Pretty Women and Butter Chicken, where we have people like Nargis Fakhri tweeting, eating butter chicken, posing with it. So, so it's making it cool because, okay, I'll be honest, I don't even like butter chicken. I was not born eating it. Like, I've had paneer butter masala.
Butter paneer, yes, I was about to say that.
Paneer butter masala and bad versions. So, like, I was never a fan of paneer or
What is paneer butter masala, lababdar, kadhai? They're all three of the same thing with slightly different densities of the curry.
With
Exactly,
adrak.
thank you.
One has got adrak, one has got kasuri methi.
So, so it is really what the market needed. Like Mumbai needed a good butter chicken is what I realized. I put my entrepreneurial business side mind. I am half Bania, half Sindhi, half Marwadi.
Oh my God. That's the three best business communities on the planet. I should. Buddy, we should talk afterwards.
So I just thought that there was some maths to it, and we are going to complete a year in 2 months, and as of now we have sold about 20,000 portions of butter chicken in 8 months. And in fact, we had a lady from Dubai who gave us a call a week before she was traveling to India. She had to travel to Delhi. She took a detour from Mumbai. She's like, I'm going to take a detour just to get this butter chicken for my husband to fly back to Delhi. So she got her parcel delivered. We had to deliver her parcel to the international airport, where she took the parcel and she actually flew down to Delhi. And then we had to later call her and ask her, was it worth it? like, because you're feeding butter chicken to a person in Delhi who might have had it at legendary places. So, yeah?
Was it?
I'm not going to tell you that.
But guys, I have a testimony. When we were shooting for MasterChef, this gentleman came with butter chicken to our stage. Now, between shoots, there's some time, right? Because our crews are not very efficient, so there's time gaps.
Yeah.
And one of the co-judges, obviously Vikas Khanna, world-famous chef. The guy is a specimen. He is one of the most fit, disciplined eaters I've ever known. He eats sprouts for lunch. I saw him eat sprouts for 3 months in a row for lunch, and that's it. And dinner used to be tofu. I'm not kidding. Unsalted tofu. That was his dinner. Super fit, works out, yoga, everything. He finished one whole portion of his butter chicken. So his butter chicken is good.
And no, I think, what we do also in hindsight is, we might be called Goila Butter Chicken, but we serve a Sindhi style mutton. We are now introducing a Naga style pork on the menu.
Where's my copyright? Sorry. It's not mine.
And no, so we are doing all of that because the audience is not. When you do social media and when you go online and when you do TV shows, you realize that your market is not the influencers, not the 0.5% of the society who knows their food. There are people who don't want to eat the Naga pork. And there are people who would run away from your restaurant if you told them that I'm serving some Assamese chili or I'm serving, some South Indian dish which is not idli, dosa or sambar. So for them, to convince those people, you have to make it simpler and package it smarter. Maybe social, like at social if you did Assamese pop-up, it will work because people come there they think it's a cafe. They are more accepting of formats.
No, so does social media, I mean, there's this whole explosion of social media, but what you're saying is that it impacts the business if used judiciously. I mean, obviously the product needs to be right?
Yeah. So exactly.
Even I on New Year's I had a party. I called for butter chicken from his house, and it was everybody loved butter chicken and his Sindhi mutton and what was the
And
other
I
thing?
had
that
butter
you said?
chicken for lunch yesterday.
It's very, very good.
Okay, so Riaz, the billion-dollar question: what makes a restaurant successful? Product, marketing, social media, critics, bloggers.
I think it's 4 things, really. I think it's good food, it's good service, it's good vibes, and it's good storytelling. And I think that 4 things make a good
So
restaurant.
we've had a lot of storytelling here today. I'm going to open this to the audience. Questions. It's about food. Everyone has an opinion. Come on.
One observation and one question. The children are still going for Italian food while we are discussing that, we are trying to rebrand the Indian food, but somehow I am finding that I have 2 children, probably post-millennials. When we go out, they say, no, only Italian, don't want to have Indian. And so something more needs to be done, what has already been done. The second thing is I would like to understand whether there is a opportunity to do some niche restaurants like maybe let's say organic food restaurant or something like gluten-free food restaurant, something of that sort.
Who's going to take this?
To answer the first part, I think firstly, if your kids are only having Italian, please take them to either Social or Farzi Cafe. Okay?
No,
And make them
listen,
try-
this is very bad.
No, I'm just saying, make them try what cool Indian food will taste like because I'm sure they will love it. So, but listen, it's honestly about exposing them to that. And I guarantee you, it's in our genes. Guys, listen, we've been eating this food for 10,000 years. Yeah. Suddenly some risotto or burger and pizza is not going to come and change our taste buds. Okay? We love it. It has been marketed properly, but it's getting there. We're starting to market it properly. Worldwide is becoming a phenomena, and I think this is the right time. This is the right time to get your kids to start appreciating our wonderful food. I think it's outstanding. Just take them once, please. Take them there. Be my guest. I'll contact you after outside. Okay, let's convert all our kids to Indian food eaters, okay? I think it's a great business.
I think exposure to a diverse tradition of food and also not just, why are we saying only Indian food? There are other kinds of cuisines as well, which are, and if your kids want to eat those kind of foods, sure. I think any kind of exposure is brilliant. And maybe, they will just find their way to what they really want to eat at some point in their lives and be able to discern what is good food and what isn't. And I think that should be the bottom line. What was the other part of your question?
Organics.
Organic food. Anaita?
So I think when we're thinking about, when he said organic and gluten-free and things like that, there are a lot of people, a lot of customers coming into restaurants and they specifically want to talk to a chef because of allergies and, they might be lactose intolerant. And I think it's just becoming more and more common now. So as chefs and as restaurateurs, we're making an effort to add certain dishes to the menu we're making an effort to do a special menu which are, which are gluten-free and which is organic. But again, there's a full chain and there's a full system behind it. So you need to go back to knowing if the farmer is growing something organic, and that's a completely different topic. But as chefs, I can tell you that what we are trying to do is we're trying to use seasonal, we're trying to use local. So you don't have to run behind, kale, whereas you can, use something as locally grown as amaranth, or bajra, make something with bajra, or use, go in red rice. So, there are ways that we are trying to incorporate into our food, but it's a slow process. It's going to take time as chefs, but we're doing it one step at a time.
I think one of the very visible things we are seeing is this whole incorporating of local ingredients as well, not just local cuisines, but local ingredients as well within restaurants. And I think a lot of our chefs are doing a very good job with it.
Hi. So as a vegetarian, I find myself quite challenged when I go through the restaurant's menus. It's not all the time that I want to eat salads in the name of eating healthy. I look at non-vegetarian options and you have roasted chicken or grilled fish. And for vegetarians, you just have deeply fried stuff. So that is something I wanted to point out.
Yeah, so you're very lucky that you're vegetarian in India. I think it's the best country to be vegetarian in. There's, seriously, you try being a vegetarian outside India and you'll know. But the fact of the matter is, even today, I can guarantee you that most of our restaurants have 50% or more vegetarian options. 50% of options are more vegetarian. If you think there's only cheese, or deep fried, I get what you're saying. We're trying to make that. That is a real issue, because I often find that most vegetarian options in terms of food either have cheese or have fries or have potatoes, right? It's or paneer in that sense. So I agree with you. There needs to be a little bit more innovation in that. And I fully, what Anaida said about looking at local ingredients and why are we running after lettuce and romaine and arugula when we have so much biodiversity in our country. And I think that there's a lot to be learned from Indian restaurants like Som and Swati, which do some incredible stuff with vegetarian food. And I fully get that needs to come to the forefront a lot more. So it's absolutely right.
But I do agree that India is the best place to be vegetarian for sure. I think we're the only naturally vegetarian country on the planet. Every other country is, very small, minuscule population is vegetarian, and they're also fashionably vegetarian. They find it cool to be vegan. I don't know. I don't know how you're going to survive on vegan food for long. But let me give you an example. We were on a road trip while I was studying in the US, in Boston. We were going from Boston to New York. I was with a Jain Gujarati friend of mine. Okay, we happened to have to stop to get gas. Next to the gas station was a McDonald's. All French fries in McDonald's are made in beef fat. Okay, so you can't eat that. He knew that, luckily. He asked for a vegetarian burger. Firstly, it took him 5 minutes to explain to the person who was taking the order, vegetarian burger. They didn't understand what he wanted. He said, I just want no meat in my burger. I'm not kidding. This is what happened 2 seconds later. She got a piece of bun with a slice of cheese in the middle. That was given to him. That was his lunch, poor guy. They didn't even put any mayo or lettuce.
No
because,
tomato.
Huh?
No tomato.
No tomato. Lettuce bhi nahi dala. Cheese and bun. And that's it. That was his. So, you're actually, but I agree with you. I think, like what Riaz said, over 50% of most menus in India are vegetarian because we have so many vegetarian customers. It makes logical business sense to have a lot of vegetarian food. But also because Indians have done magic with vegetables. Go to Gujarat and Rajasthan. Oh my God, I'm a hardcore non-vegetarian kind of guy, but on Tuesdays and Thursdays when I'm veg, I'm very happy. I don't miss the non-veg food, and we've done magic with that stuff.
Even in the cafe and bar context, because I track restaurant trends, somebody just in fact pitched a story to me about how vegetarian bars are going to be the next trend. I don't know whether they're going to be the next trend or not, but at least there seems to be a beginning.
In South Bombay, it's huge.
Yeah.
In Bombay, it's huge, no?
In South Bombay, it's huge.
In Delhi too, and
Kamla
now,
Mills,
surprisingly. In Delhi also, one or two.
Really? There are lots of vegetarian bars
Not
in
lots,
Delhi?
not lots
I
at all.
don't see vegetarian bars doing well in Delhi. Let me tell you.
They might not be vegetarian bars, but the people ordering the drinks are usually vegetarian.
Yeah.
Shall we wrap it up?
There's one more question right there.
As we were talking about authentic regional food, so a lot of homemade communities are coming up on social media also and otherwise. So as restauranteurs, do you welcome this or is it a threat?
No, I don't see it as a threat at all. I think it's great to engage with these communities. And see, I'll tell you quite frankly, my personal crusade or my personal sense of responsibilities towards Indian food. Whatever promotes it, I'm all for it. I can't wait for that day when I go to any major country of the world and one of the top 3 dining destinations is an Indian restaurant. It's not the case right now. Maybe in London, nowhere else. And so by engaging the community, by finding wonderful Bohri food or Parsi food or Naga food, if we can get it to the forefront, if we can spread the word, then we're all for it. I don't think Riaz or I or any of the restaurateurs here would feel any sense of threat. I think it's great.
No,
I think it's
fact,
phenomenal.
It's also happening a lot. I don't know about Delhi because not.
Delhi has
done this recently. In fact, Anuthi does her Kayesh pop-ups in so many hotels, in so many different.
Actually, now not in hotels because I'm bored of hotels. Okay. So we just did one in a old Delhi Haveli. So I, these very offbeat, off kind of.
So
locations.
similarly in Bombay, there's this lady who does northeastern Gitika. Saikia is a thing, her name, and she just did a pop-up in one of the restaurants in Bandra, which does not even do Indian food. I think that was remarkable that them being European, they still hosted her cuisine in her restaurant.
Just adding a little bit about the regional part and homemakers. I think the real regional food is in someone's home. If you get invited to someone's home and they cook for you, I think you can't get closer to the authentic flavor. So it can never be a threat for restaurateurs because they would actually want to bring those people on board. And even at Soda Bottle Openawala, we've got this lady, a Parsi lady, who makes brinjal pickle. And there are people who come and ask me that, do you guys make it in-house? And I say, no, we've got this lady. She's good at it. So, you can always order it from her. Or my mother, who makes the masalas and she sells the masala. So I think it can never be a threat. And those homes and that cooking will actually give chefs at all ages inspiration to put more on the menu and actually bring you more authentic food.
Thank you very much. This was a really entertaining session, at least for us. We hope it was for you as well.